What really worries me today is what's going to happen to us if machines can think. And what interests me specifically is, can they?
Well, that's a very hard question to answer. If you'd asked me that question just a few years ago, I'd have said it was very far-fetched. And today, I just have to admit I don't really know.
Well, if you're confused, Doctor, how do you think I feel?
This is AI for the Rest of Us, a podcast from the University of Texas at Austin.
I'm Mark Earhart.
And I'm Casey Boyle.
This is a show that helps explain artificial intelligence, what it means, who it affects, and what you need to know right now.
I'm convinced that machines can and will think in our lifetime.
There is going to be all this automation. People are going to be out of work.
Computers are taking over now.
Here I am playing chess with a computer.
And then I just flick a switch on the modem and replace the receiver. I'm now waiting for the computer to answer me.
Today on AI for the Rest of Us.
If you think about a physician or a judge or an executive making decisions, there are a lot of opportunities for AI to make those decisions better, more fair, if we do it right. And it's not as straightforward as some of us have assumed earlier on.
I think we need to be starting from this question, which is which parts of your job are meaningful to you and which parts of your job do you want automated?
Hi, Casey.
Hey, Mark.
Well, thanks to jury duty, I missed yet another great conversation. So this time, you got to talk to a couple of experts on the ways that AI might change the way we work. What kinds of things did you ask them?
Well, I wanted to know who will ultimately benefit from having more of our work done by AI. Will it be the employees or employers? I asked about potential harms, like forcing us to spend time cleaning up mediocre products, pushing down wages, or eliminating jobs altogether. I asked our guests what advice they have for people to best prepare for working in an AI-powered future.
So let's meet our guests.
I'm Meital Sartsikhansky. I'm a professor at McCombs School of Business. I've been developing AI algorithms, especially around improving decision-making, but also societal and business organizational goals and personal goals.
And I'm Samantha Shorey. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Communication Studies. I have been studying for about the last decade the social consequences of emerging technologies. And lately, I've been focusing on AI in the context of work, and especially low-wage work.
So my first question is somewhat general. What are some of the biggest changes you see happening in the workplace due to AI over the next few years?
I think we're already seeing some of the changes. So in many high-risk jobs or higher-risk tasks, we're seeing AI as facilitators, sort of creating, let's say, coders, software development in general, where, the AI is not going to autonomously create stuff, but it's going to produce sort of an initial draft, if you will, of the code for an engineer or a programmer, and then that they will ultimately revise. So that we're already seeing is a multiplier. It allows people to do like 4 times the amount of work or whatever, twice the amount of work they could do otherwise. People are using it to draft emails and what have you, create summaries of meetings, initial drafts of those. All these typically is where the AI is used as an accelerator or multiplier in terms of productivity, but ultimately a human is getting that input, revising it, and maybe, reiterating, etc. And there's a separate types of AI that help people make decisions. That's fundamentally different from creating content or code or something like that. Right. These are very different challenges. But if you think about a physician or a judge or an executive, a business executive making decisions, there are a lot of opportunities for AI to make those decisions better, more fair. So, for example, when we're talking about advising physicians are humans. There's only so much information that they can bring to bear at any given time. AI can really look at trends and incorporate an extensive set of information and bring that to bear very productively in a way that a human cannot do. It can detect let's say, medical images for diagnosis. It can detect things that are very difficult for human to detect. So there are these complementarities that it's not just expediting our work. It's not just taking away the tedious, the boring part of the job. It can really do things that we cannot do if we do it right. And it's not as straightforward as some of us have assumed earlier on.
I love where Maytal left off on that, this idea that the integration of any technology into existing work routines is not straightforward.
Right.
Anybody who has tried to implement a technology or new software in their workplace knows that getting people to use a technology, to embrace it, to integrate it into their existing routines, it's complex. It's resisted.
Yeah. I want people just to use calendar invites.
Yes.
Right? And this is pretty simple technology in our day and age, but that's even difficult to get everybody on board with.
Thinking about this moment of integration and where we're at now, it is going to be disruptive, not in the cool economic sense, but disruptive of the work routines that currently exist. Anytime that somebody has developed tacit knowledge or an existing way of doing things, you're talking about the calendar invites, it is going to be destabilizing at first. And so thinking about this as like a productivity hack or something that's going to be making people more effective right away, plug and play, is something we need to be asking serious questions about, because integration is labor. Integration is work. And it's a lot of the time additional work and a different kind of work for certain folks. It's technological. It's going to involve troubleshooting. The routines also resemble co-design in some ways. And so accounting for that additional work that is going to make these systems relevant to their context of use, I think is a huge thing we need to be thinking about
right now. So Sam, I need to cite you in one of my papers that I was just sending to a journal, because it's all about building an AI that accounts for these factor, especially when you're advising a high-risk decision maker like a physician or a surgeon. There is an additional effort that these individuals need to incur when the AI contradict their initial judgment. They're not just going to say, oh, I don't think this organ needs to go into this patient, but the AI says it does, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it.
Right.
They have to now come up with understanding, the reasoning behind why should I do it.
In the best case scenario, some AI have the ability to, offload some of the most tedious tasks that we have. Calendar invites or quick emails that summarizes meetings, that sort of thing. Who actually benefits from such changes? And if we're multiplying productivity in a worker, is it the worker who benefits?
We really need as a society, and as we talk to students, I really want to say to the students that it's not a force of nature.
Mm-hmm.
It's in our hands. Everyone needs to feel empowered, and we are as a society, to determine where this is going. We should not treat it as a destiny that we just need to flow or go wherever it goes.
Right.
We can define it. We can decide where it goes and how we use it. And yes, there is the potential for the benefits, as we saw with a lot of recent technologies, starting from the internet, that the benefits really concentrate at the upper echelons, that there's a very small proportion. I mean, inequality only increased as a result of technology, and AI has all the potential to only expedite that and expand that inequality. Politicians, everyday people have the power to demand and to form organizations, civil society, to make sure that it doesn't. What do we do with this? Society needs to have a say.
There's a lot of concern right now that AI will eventually replace workers. And in that, it participates in a long line of automation. What historical precedents can we draw on to talk about AI in that sort of trajectory of automation? Which historical events have no purchase on what's happening today?
One of the things that come to mind is just a long history of scholarship in what is called the social construction of technology. When we look historically at a technology that is now what we call in communication studies domesticated, it's obvious to us what it's for, like the telephone. When the telephone was first introduced, people had no idea what it was for, really. It was clear that it could connect two people in different locations to exchange voice. But initial thoughts around the telephone were maybe it would be used to deliver news to homes, or maybe it would be used to deliver music, which is ironic now that we had the iPod that turned into the iPhone. And so we are in some ways seeing that play out. But this process of domestication is not designer imagines a technology, says how it will be used, users pick it up and hit play on that vision of designers. And when we think about generative AI, we are in a really similar moment where there's this technology, it has all these capabilities, but there's not a clear and direct use case for it yet. And that is being developed by the people who are using it in their everyday work. And along with that comes a series of normative decisions around like what appropriate use of this technology is. When the telephone first came out, people used the telephone in ways that were not aligned with the initial conceptions of how the phone would be used. For example, women were always picking up the phone and gabbing to each other. It was initially seen as not what the phone was for. But this type of use was developed over time. We see also this historically with the internet. Early time use of large frame computers, when people used it for social purposes, it was like, no, this is for crunching data or this is for delivering news. And so we watch these social outcomes emerge from technologies and really get kind of reinvented or established by the users who put them into practice. And so I'm really interested to see, knowing this historically, what happens with our technology. So that's like the hopeful part, the open-ended part.
Yeah.
But then when we think even on a shorter historical timeline, the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2020 said that over the last 20 years, there's been a 60% increase in worker productivity in the United States.
Wow.
And only a 10% increase in worker time. And so you're like, cool, 60% more work, only 10% more time. But my brain is like, 60% more work, why any more time? You know, like if we are already totally independent of Gen AI, producing 60% more stuff, as they put it, in a 2-decade period, we should start seeing some of those social benefits of less work.
Higher wages.
We should start to be seeing some of that. And we haven't over the last 20 years. And so I think what Maytal is calling us towards to say, like, actually, this is not just going to happen, but we have to, as people demand this, is a big part of it. So there's the power to the people. Users will decide how to use this technology. And we need to participate in these larger social forces to direct the direction of history.
Absolutely. And I think with AI and the way it will change the nature of work, potentially, there could be harms as well.
One of those harms I wanted to ask about was the revaluation of skills in real time, right? Which pushes down wages, expects workers to use AI tools to do even more work, as we've been talking about, or it makes our jobs more frustrating as we all have to constantly fix mediocre, inaccurate work from AI assistants, right? I know a bunch of freelance writers, for instance, and when ChatGPT came out, not even the newest versions, the earliest versions, their jobs were halved, and they were, instead of given like, let's say $500 to write a 300-word blog post, they were given, here's $100 to edit this really bad generated text, right? And so their jobs just like flipped from being a writer with skills that they've developed over a career to being an editor of this brand new, poorly deployed technology. What about those more subtle effects that have sometimes more ranging consequences than perhaps we're connecting the dots of right now?
I think what you lay out there around what parts of our job is AI going to do, and the example that you laid out as the copywriter would be familiar to anybody that has used a self-checkout. That is probably a place where automation has touched just about everyone in their daily life. It works terribly. I think most people agree. And yet, we are still kind of like surprised and have been taken off guard when this same dynamic is now touching the sphere of intellectual work.
Yes.
For cashiers, we have watched over this period of implementation as this exact phenomenon has occurred, where they used to be able to connect with customers. They would ring people up and have difficult transactions and easy transactions. Now, when you go into CVS, they are purely troubleshooting. The customer is already frustrated. They are having to enact surveillance to make sure people don't steal. Those are all the worst parts of a person's job, I would venture to guess. So when we think about aspects of work, I think we need to be starting from this question, which is which parts of your job are meaningful to you and which parts of your job do you want automated? And for the process of creation, I think that potentially people are willing to hand over certain aspects of their creative process. For example, maybe like formatting or something like that. But even designers, they have rulers for eyes. That's what their pleasure is in. But I really have some kind of open questions or a critical eye towards the idea that the parts of our work that are being automated are just the ones that are easiest for designers to automate.
Right.
And so I want us to start developing as academics, as designers, and as people in the workplace, a shared research agenda for these are the things that I want to be handed over to automation. And these are the parts of my job that are meaningful to me and that I want to hold on to.
It does ultimately ties into societal values.
Right.
If productivity and creating wealth is a value, and it is a value in capitalist society, then the issues that some raised are just going to be secondary or worse, or, they're not going to be a top priority. This is something that is broader than really what we can do with the technology or how we can design it. But if the societal values are not there, if people don't value these connections, or society is not built around, to allow people to have meaningful jobs because it's more cost effective for you to do the surveillance work or whatever that does not make you feel good or does not make you connected, we're still going to go there. And I think this is a lot more fundamental. Like, where do we start? I think we have lost some of it.
There's so much work in our world that isn't done by robots, but asks people to act like robots.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I heard in Maytal's response, and that was really brought up for me. Maybe that was some nostalgia from my childhood when I was thinking about the checker who has the connection with the people in their community, because these directives towards productivity have already wicked that away from work, and it has made people's actions more autonomized, less connected to their communities. And so AI or automation is part of that. But you're right, it's a larger set of social values around what work does for the people who do it, does for the people who are on the other side of customer interactions, needs a fundamental re-questioning.
Right. If you had a startup and said, I have a startup that's going to help every company to pick and choose, how to design those jobs so that people will find it more meaningful, I actually think that at the end of the day, those companies can be a lot more successful. People would want to work for them, or they will retain more workers, etc. But ultimately, are you going to be able to find funding even to develop this idea? So I think that's really embedded in what resources are invested and what sort of ideas are given a green light and what ideas are not going to be.
Yeah, and we see this even in the history of mechanization, right? People doing the smallest piece as fast as possible, whereas we know that that's called vertical job loading. But horizontal job loading is much more satisfying and intrinsically motivating to workers to make a single product from beginning to end, like cobbling a shoe. And over time, perhaps companies that allow workers to experience that full crafts process would benefit from the, long-term investment of their employees. But when we simply think of it as objects coming off a line, mechanization is going to win out.
What kinds of advice do you have for people who are either just starting out their careers or even mid-career or late career even, really? What should they do to make sure that they are able to make a good living in a future AI-powered economy?
Sam, I think, articulated something beautifully that I think is a really... When she said it, I said, this is exactly what I thought when I decided to be a scholar and a researcher. And I think this is maybe what, if people have a choice when they're young, really to think about, of course you want to be able to make a living, but think about the nature of the work that you're going to do and choose things that would have that kind of breadth, kind of a end-to-end perspective, accounting for how AI, might be integrated in that. But I think there are plenty of opportunities to do that. Yeah. Even, being an AI scientist, I think
absolutely
is one of these opportunities. I think finding something that you find meaningful and satisfying should be key.
I totally agree with that. And also would add that so many of when I think, especially young people who are graduating from the University of Texas or other universities, they are graduating with this amazing knowledge and also into often positions of power in their local organizations. And one of the things that I really try to center in those conversations with people who are entering the workforce and maybe not immediately, but will quickly become managers and decision makers in their space is to really think about the kinds of experiences that they've had as students or as early workers and what was meaningful to them or what was diminishing to them, and to make early commitments to yourself about what it is that you are going to orchestrate onto others. I teach a class here at UT called Using Technology at Work, and the most surprising thing about this class is that the most often thing that students reach out to me about after graduation is a unit that we have that's about the diffusion of innovation and implementation of new technologies in workplaces. Because young people graduate into workplaces where they are seen as like very tech savvy, right. And they're often given this really big decision to make around like, should we implement this new tech? Should we implement this platform or get, this internal messaging system, or maybe it's going to be around Gen AI in this next decision. And that decision is placed in their lap. They need to be able to evaluate the pros and the cons and the potential impact that it might have on their workers. And that is huge in its significance for the people that are working for them and working with them. And when I think about like what keeps me up at night about AI, it's 100% like workplace surveillance.
Right.
The ability for us to gather enormous amounts of data about workers and use that algorithmically to make decisions about people's performance, their productivity, their behavior. And maybe that's a little Black Mirror of me, but our students oftentimes have like had direct experience with these types of technologies. All of those experiences that they've had embodied, that they're like, this technology is harmful to me. I hope that knowledge and that experience can be critically connected to some decisions that they might have in the future around AI or advanced technologies that, no, I am not going to do that to somebody else.
So basically it's remember your experiences as you are moving up and moving outwards towards, higher positions of authority or responsibility. Remember how those felt to you.
Yes, remember how those felt to you, and also realize that like sometimes you can say no.
Right.
So much around this, oftentimes I think Maytal really pointed us towards, and also in our valorization of the entrepreneur and the innovator, is there's this pervasive fear of missing out when it comes to innovation that we have. We're like, if I don't use this new high-tech technology, our business might fail, I might get left behind.
Right.
And so often decisions are made from that place of fear rather than really understanding or critically considering what is the benefit of this technology to myself and the people I work with.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff when we mentioned were kind of pessimistic, or we focused a lot on the risk. But, the reason actually I chose to become an AI researcher, which was, a few decades ago, was because of the promise. And I think the promise has been delivered. AI is helping developing new cures, new drugs. It's improving diagnostic abilities. It can do a lot more wonderful things. And I think it's in our hands to really balance like any powerful technology.
Right.
Basically, companies and entrepreneurs are rushing to reap some benefits without being thoughtful.
Right.
It needs to be done thoughtfully. And that, I think, common sense is not that common. I think that there's a lot of things that are being done that are they're not thoughtful, and then they're harmful. We cannot replace all these people out there. But I think that governments and civil societies have a role to play.
Well, Maytal, Sam, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll be hearing from you, and we're excited about your work that you're working on right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
This has been such a fun conversation.
Yeah. That's our show. Next time on AI for the Rest of Us.
The ability to solve climate problems by engineering proteins that are inside a bacteria with the right AI models and AI designs. Boy, that would really change the world.
Every time you're observing a data set, especially anything to do with images, ranging from astronomy to medical imaging, I think these fields are being transformed already because you have better telescopes, better images, and better microscopes.
AI for the Rest of Us is a production of the University of Texas at Austin's College of Natural Sciences and College of Liberal Arts. Our show is part of the university's Year of AI. To learn more, visit yearofai.utexas.edu.
For links and more resources on today's topic, go to aifortherest.net.
Looking for more great podcasts about AI? Then check out Generation AI. It's produced by our friends over at The Drag Audio, a student-run podcast production house at UT Austin. They cover topics like making cities smarter, autonomous vehicles, election disinformation, and more.
Big thanks today to our guests, Samantha Shorey and Maytal Sar-Tahansky. Our executive producers are Christine Sinatra and Dan Oppenheimer. Sound design and audio editing by Robert Scaramuccia. Our theme music is by Aiolos Rue. Our interviews are recorded by the fabulous audio engineers at the Liberal Arts ITS recording studio.
Thanks for listening.